On this episode of Game Shack, I'm going to give you guys 5 reasons why virtual pinball is superior to real pinball. Coming up next. Hey everybody, welcome on back into the Game Shack. I am your host, JDV. Thanks for stopping by the channel. It really does mean a lot to us. If you can give us a thumbs up on the way out the door, that'd be really awesome. Okay, so number 5 on my list, why virtual pinball is superior to real world pinball is the size, cost, and weight of real pinball versus virtual pinball. But when you consider that you can get 1,000 different pinball games on a virtual pinball game, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about that later, versus just the one game in real pinball for that kind of money, and you begin to see the difference. No matter how much the real world pinball game is great, and there are some just amazing tables like Addams Family, Twilight Zone, almost all of the new Sterns. There's a lot to be said about almost all of them, Jersey Jacks. There's all kinds of great new tables that come out all the time. But no matter how great a pinball table is, you will eventually get sick of it. And if not sick of it, you will want to have more variety in your game room. So if you can only afford to have one real pinball game, you are going to get tired of it. And I have, over there I have a Street Fighter pinball game, which is a great game if you can only afford to have one pinball game because it does so much. I'm going to have an episode on how to buy real world pinball, and that's one of the things to look for is how many different things can it do. But ultimately, you will get tired of any real world pinball game. So having the ability to have more than just one for the same cost in the same body is a big plus. And also it's the maneuverability. I can move this pinball game all by myself very easily. I can slide it around on the carpet, no big deal at all. This whole game right here, I'm gonna guess weighs in at just about 100 pounds. Really not that bad at all considering the size of it. If you contrast that with my Street Fighter pinball game, that thing weighs over 400 pounds, takes 4 strong guys to move it, into a truck or whatever like that, and 2 just to move it around in the arcade here. So the size, weight, all of that leads to an advantage to virtual pinball. The other thing is this, real world pinball games break down all the time. Brand new Sterns out of the box will have things wrong with them. There'll be things that you have to adjust. You're gonna have to open it up, you're gonna have to bend wires, you're gonna have to replace stuff. And eventually, no matter how much you baby your pinball game, no matter how well you treat it, it will require someone to work on it, which is a massive disadvantage if you don't have a pinball tech in your town or you're not handy with your hands. And the older the pinball game you have, so each decade you go backwards, is more likely that you are going to have someone service your game. There's also the effect that the balls wear down. You have to level the machine. So you do have to replace the ball. Sometimes the glass will break. There's all sort of things that will absolutely go wrong in real world pinball that won't necessarily go wrong in virtual. Now that said, the one huge advantage that real world pinball has over virtual is you flick it on and assuming the game is in good working order, you can be playing pinball within 30 seconds of you flipping on the switch. It's not quite that easy in virtual pinball. And of course, you're gonna have to know things about computers and have to set it up and things like that. But overall, the overall ease of use, the cost, all of that, that's a huge benefit to virtual pinball. Well, I've already talked about it a little bit, but my 4th reason why virtual pinball games are better than real world is, of course, the number of pinball games that you can get in them. I think I have over 1,000 virtual tables on this. Now, they're not all good. Some of them are just outright crap. But I'd say that I have about 25 to 30 tables on here that are legit. I mean, straight up amazing. Tables that I can play hour after hour, day after day, never really get sick of. And when I do, I just go back into the menu and here I am playing another table. It allows you to play real world tables that you would probably never get to play in real life. Like, I'm lucky enough that I have a pinball arcade in the town over from where I'm at. It's a great great pinball place, but even that place only has 25 pinball tables in it. And there are thousands of real-world pinball. They've been making real-world pinball since the 50s. And it's very hard to go and play all of them. Well, thanks to virtual pinball, you can play every single pinball game that has ever been made on this game. Now, is any one of those games going to match up perfectly to the real-world pinball game? No. The real-world pinball game would win in a head-to-head competition versus a real-world table in virtual pinball land, but it's very, very close. I'm going to talk about that next. The third reason why virtual pinball game is better than real-world pinball is you cannot play virtual pinball game only tables in the real world. Now, you say, well, of course, yes, but it is amazing how many great virtual pinball tables there are now. There are just some really outstanding built from scratch tables built for VPX, Future Pinball, that are simply outstanding. A game like Star Wars Assault is it's one of the funnest pinball games I've ever played, and yet it does not exist at all in the real world. I mean, I don't know what I would do without this game. It's the whole reason why I made this a Star Wars build, is that this game is so outstanding, and yet the only way to get it is on a virtual pinball game. And at the same time, even real-world pinball games like Terminator 2 here with pup packs, you can have video from the movie pop up, you can have different call-outs. So a game like the original Star Trek from 1979, there are virtual versions of that now that have the soundtrack from the movies in there. They have new call-outs, new sound effects, everything like that. So that makes virtual table arguably better than the real world table because it has better sound effects, it has better music, it has better video, it has video period. There are many, many things that virtual pinball can do that real pinball simply can't do, like lightning effects, or when like a wizard comes and grabs a ball or something like that in a game like a Sorcerer's Lair. In Sorcerer's Lair, you go to different sections of the castle, so to speak, and those will be completely different virtual pinball tables all within the same game. Well, obviously you could never do that in a real world table. So the fact that it is virtual is a negative in a way, because any one table probably isn't as good as the real world counterpart, but those lines are starting to blur together. And of course, you can soup up older solid state games and EM games to have different sound effects and things like that. So that leads us into the second reason why virtual pinball is better. Second reason why virtual pinball games are better than the real world counterparts isn't just because they have so many of them. It isn't just because you can have different sound effects, better music, video, things like that. But the fact is, you can forget that you're even playing a virtual pinball game once you kind of get into the game. It will easily fool your brain into thinking that you're playing a real pinball game. And even if it doesn't, it's still incredibly fun to play. So playing real world pinball is its own experience. Playing virtual pinball is its own experience. And if you compare the two, virtual pinball, when you have a souped up kind of rig like I have, gets you to like 85, maybe 90% of the way down the road to making it feel like it is a real pinball game. I still end up shaking the table trying to nudge the ball instead of the nudge button because my brain thinks it's real. And of course, I built this from the ground up. My brain should know that it is absolutely not real. But again, we're so close now in terms of the technology, the physics, all of that. It is very close. And even if it isn't quite real, it's still so good, it doesn't matter. And the number one reason why virtual pinball is ultimately going to replace real pinball games is the fact that we are really just still in the infant stages of virtual pinball. The sky is the limit for where this is going. You have programs like Unreal 5 that you can see now in Mandalorian and Last of Us and other big name movies. Well, that technology is moving to video games. There's a kind of a first-person shooter right now that is blowing up YouTube because when you're playing the game, it looks absolutely real. Well, that is going to eventually come to virtual pinball, where it will look even better than it does now. It will look even more three-dimensional. Eventually, we're going to have really reliable ability for a tracker in the front of the game to kind of track where your head movement is at, where your eyes are at. And once that's incorporated into Unreal, the table will really start to move. There are some builds out there that do it, but again, we're still in the infant stage of this technology. But 10 years from now, I mean, I can't even wait to see what is going to be happening in the realm of virtual. And again, it has all those other advantages I already talked about. All that said, I hope that real world pinball never dies. There is a certain charm, there is a certain loveliness to a pinball, and there is some things in real world pinball that will always be a little bit better than virtual, like hitting a really hard shot where you bust a spinner and the spinner moves, or the ball jumps around, and sometimes will even jump off the track and kind of roll down into a place where it's not supposed to. You're never going to really get that in a virtual experience that you can get in real world. Virtual pinball is the way of the future, but I hope that real pinball never dies. All right, if you like this sort of content, please give me a thumbs up on the way out the door. It really does help the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so you know when other videos like this come out. I'm going to have a video coming up real soon on 5 tips for buying a real pinball game if you're still interested in doing that. Love each other, and until next time, I'll see you guys in the Game Shack. Mwah!
Be sure to visit evilgeniusentertainment.com for exclusive content, swag, casting call news, and much, much more.